This is an acrylic painting tutorial that will focus on how to paint clouds with a very simple color palette. If you love learning about art, hit that subscribe button and support this public school teacher's side hustle. All my materials are linked in my description box, but I will be using a piece of watercolor paper and Blick Studio Acrylic paints. You can use a canvas and you can use any paint that you would like. And I'm starting with a lot of water on my brush and I'm kind of mapping in the basic shape of my clouds. Before you start, have some inspiration. What a wonderful opportunity to go outside and paint looking at the sky. But if you're in the classroom like me, or you're at home, or it's dark, a quick Google search will provide plenty of inspiration, or if you live in Oklahoma like me, you might have a camera roll full of inspiring cloud images to go from. I am not using a pencil. I am layering with paint here, and because this is Blick Studio Acrylics, they are really strongly pigmented and they're a lot thicker than some of the craft paint you might buy at Walmart. So I would say be a little picky about your paint. Clouds can be thin, but I'm going to be building up my layers to create a really thick, beautiful cloud scene. So you can use whatever paint. You could do it with watercolor, but I'm going to create with this white here. In the white spaces, I'm going to then layer a little bit more thick. So I'm taking my titanium white, and instead of leaving it blank like you would like watercolor style, I am blending wet on wet the blue paint with the white, painting very thick and trying to create a nice fluffy cloud-like texture. When using a controlled color scheme, painting wet on wet can make really great results because you're blending directly on the paper. Speaking of that, I'm going to go ahead and add some cadmium red, medium hue. I'm going to blend that to create a kind of lavender, purple, almost neutral color to the bottom of my clouds. Now, the beauty of clouds is you could keep it very simple and you could simply do any blue you want and white, but I'm a color mixing person and I want to create a little bit of drama. And I like that violet goes with the color scheme, but I also like that it kind of grays it out a little bit. It's not the most vibrant purple, this cadmium red and this ultramarine blue. And so I feel like it creates a really nice kind of almost stormy sky, which for me in Oklahoma is something I see often. I'm using the same brush to dip into white and I'm blending that out. And again, if your color scheme and your palette is very controlled and simple, you can kind of get away with that. If you have lots of colors, you want to have individual brushes or palette knives for mixing, and you also want to clean your brush more often. But because this is almost monochromatic, I'm really only using the three colors, blue and white dominantly, and then that cadmium red, just to kind of violet things up a little bit. I'm going to get away with using just this one brush. Also, acrylic paint dries, and then you can layer on top and really kind of get those colors that you want. Here, I'm trying to create like a softness from the cloud. So there's like a softer cloud kind of in the background. And then I want this cloud that kind of cuts through the center to be a little more textured and a little whiter. And then that will give the illusion that it's like closer and it will give us a little bit more depth. I'm also a big fan of keeping an edge or a corner really blue or really dark to really push the white of the cloud. So this top section here, and then especially going off the right-hand side, I'm going to apply more ultramarine blue. Still have a little bit of white on my brush. It's still blending into that white, but I want that to be a really heavy area of blue that kind of makes it seem as if the cloud is coming in front of that space, if that makes sense. And I'm using this blue on my brush to add that blue peeking through the clouds in other areas and into the cloud itself so that it has a nice harmonious flow to it. So the blue part I'm kind of applying in a smoother, less cloud-like texture, and then the cloud's going to be a little bit thicker and more opaque paint. And again, I'm going to be doing lots of layers, lots of back and forths, and it depends on the picture that you're looking at or if you're outside painting the day that's in front of you. The fun part about painting outside is that the clouds change as you're painting them, and that is such a fun and exciting way to paint. So if you've never done plein air painting before, I highly recommend it. It's so much fun. To create a little bit more drama, I'm going to take my cadmium red and my ultramarine blue, and I'm going to make a really dark value here. So I'm not using black. I don't want to gray things out, but I'm going to add some pure purple or violet, depending on who you're talking to, into the bottom of the cloud. I'll end up kind of subtling that and blending that more with white later, but I love the idea of a dramatic sky. And just adding it when the paint is still wet, I can blend it. And then the beauty of acrylic paint, and especially working as small as I am, this is truly like a study. then I can kind of blend that white down to it and create a nice dramatic moment and a nice variation of those blues and purples since I'm mixing it wet on wet. So I'm kind of focusing on the bottom of the cloud and then that gray purple color, just making sure it pops up in other areas of the cloud as well, so the artwork has nice color harmony. I had a blob of white, so I'm using that instead of white from the palette, so I can blend out that nice violet purple and kind of make the cloud have that beautiful fluffy texture. And we know from looking at the sky that there's lots of different types of clouds. Some of them are really fluffy like this and some of them aren't. So again, looking at images and taking pictures of skies that inspire you will be really helpful when building your visual vocabulary with clouds. My style of painting lately, whether I'm painting with acrylic or I'm painting with oil, is lots of building up of textured layers. So you'll see me kind of go back to colors I've used before, going back to the blue, going back to the white. You just saw me go back to the purple and really just kind of building up those layers instinctually. I'm not a smooth painter these days. I'm a big fan of texture and layers and really creating dynamic movement with my paint. You might be a little bit more of a perfectionist. You might be a little bit more of someone who paints smoother. And that's the beauty of clouds, is you can really not only evolve your style to what the clouds are, but your style can really match the type of clouds that fit the style that you're wanting to learn to paint or to continue to paint. I'm going to go ahead and pop in some of that white here, and you can see against the blue and even against that violet, it's really starting to come forward. It's really starting to make the clouds look a little bit more 3D, because in the sky, you're going to have so much distance, clouds that are closer to the sky, closer to the atmosphere. It's so much fun to kind of see how they change. And I love a good diagonal. I like a cloud that kind of cuts across. And I'm just a big fan of these fluffy clouds, and I want the white to really texture and layer on top. And then contrasting that, I want my blue to be applied a little bit thinner and in a more like back and forth brush stroke thin texture application. I'm taking my brush here and kind of dragging some of that blue paint, kind of smishing it up into the violet. And I love how that white paint pulled some red, but also pulled some of that more neutral violet. It's so much fun. And I'm just going to kind of tap my brush for some final details. And that's one of the beauties of working small and doing a study, is it doesn't take long to make a work of art that kind of reaches your goals as an artist. So doing things like this is very helpful to learn how to apply paint. And also when you do make a bigger painting, like maybe a full landscape, you have some practice with a technique that might be a little more intimidating to do, a larger scale work of art. Or this is pretty cute. Why can this not be a finished small scale, tiny little artwork on a piece of scrap watercolor paper? I feel pretty done here. I'm happy with the 3D effect. I'm happy with how the clouds really stand out from the blue. And so I think it's finished. Thank you so much for sticking around and painting clouds with me. And if you're interested in more painting tutorials, check these out. Find my website, thatartteacher.com, for full-length lesson plans, student examples, and classroom resources for free.